Welcome to the Better Student Ministry podcast, where we take a deep dive into practical youth ministry topics to help you and your team become better at what God has called you to do. We're joined now by your hosts, Mark and Jared, who together have over 30 years of youth ministry experience.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Better Student Ministry Podcast. My name's Jared.
And this is Mark.
We're back at it again with a good buddy of ours.
Yeah, we're really thankful to have our National Youth Director back on with us again, Josh Wellborn. Thanks so much for joining us. Where do you find yourself this morning?
I'm in the offices of the national offices of the Assemblies of God USA in Springfield, Missouri.
I have not yet taken a journey to Mecca. I have heard as a credential holder, you have to do at least one in your lifetime.
Is that the case? Well, we'd love to have you anytime. Come on down. It's raining today.
I'm concerned. I'm concerned that Mark may have a overestimated value of what this experience is going to be like. As someone who lived there for 4 years and has since been back many times, I mean, it's fine. It's nice. Springfield's a nice town to live in, but it's maybe lower your expectations a little bit.
It's a spiritual journey. I understand.
Okay.
Jared, did you ever take the headquarters tour when you were here?
I did. Yeah. I went to Central Bible College. One of the things, I can't remember which class they did, but they'd actually take us over and we get to tour, and then we get to meet with whoever the superintendent was. Who was it at that time? It must have been George Wood.
Right. Yeah, or Tom Trask.
Yeah, I think it was George Wood when I went, but maybe it was Trask. I'm not sure. But anyway, yeah, so it's cool if you've never been.
Is there a location at the national headquarters that's referred to as the Holy of Holies, just out of curiosity?
No.
Is there anywhere you need to take your shoes off before you enter? Does Superintendent Clay, does he make you take your shoes off before you enter his office?
You know what's funny is the day after he has made things so comfortable and definitely more casual than previous leaders.
So nobody wears shoes ever then, you're saying?
He's like, you're hard pressed to find a pair of shoes around that network.
Yeah, only on Casual Friday.
Casual Friday. Now, here's the honest question. And a lot of our listeners have been asking us to ask you this. Is there or is there not some sort of underground bunker with multiple years' worth supply of food and water there at the national office?
I feel like I've seen a social media post of yours where you were in some sort of like secluded space.
Yeah, so that's the basement. And there is a basement, and it's like even employees who have worked here for years, when I would post those videos down in the basement, they would say, I have never been down there. I'm like, well, you just keep going down the stairs. Like, it's no secret. But I will say this, there does seem to be a culture of people down there that is different than the rest. It's sort of this subterranean culture of primarily what looked to me like IT workers. And when they saw me down there, they gave me a very suspicious look. Like, what is he? Why is he invading our space? Wow. And here's okay. So you're fishing for a little secret. I'll give you one little secret that I know of. I don't think there's a bunker. If there's doomsday prepping supplies down there, I'm not aware of it. But there is a tunnel that goes from the main building to the facilities plant, where there's a pretty large generator and gosh, the funny thing is I'm looking at it right now and I don't even know what it is. It's just, you know how like your high school, if it was built, prior to like 1970, had some like weird building with like a smokestack coming out of it.
Oh yeah.
And it's like, I don't know what that is. Like, why does a building need that?
Yeah.
So there is a tunnel going to that. And I've been told, the legend has it that when I don't know if I should name names but I feel like it's been long enough that I'm not being dishonoring, but some of you will remember the name Jimmy Swaggart. Mm-hmm. He had a very high profile moral issue that he was dealing with, and he came to the national office to look at restoration, and they used that tunnel to get him in and out of the building without the media converging on him, because the media really had a field day with him back in they didn't treat him nice at all. And so I'm told that I have seen the tunnel. It's not very tunnel-esque. It's just a hallway that goes under the parking lot. But I think that's the one big secret that I've discovered since coming here.
Hey, feel free to use this if you want. When new interns or whoever come in, sell them tickets to the bowling alley that's over there.
Yeah, that's right.
Yes, yeah. I'll give them a season. We'll have the season pass that you can only get from the National Youth Department. Yeah.
Love it.
And it's a free pass, but you have to make a $10,000 Speed the Light contribution.
There it is.
But that gives you a membership for life.
There it is.
To the underground bowling alley.
Well, thanks for being back with us, Josh, and for breaking that news to our listeners.
Little secret for them.
A little secret. If you missed the first episode, we had Josh on before talking about social media and our Christianity and what that looks like. And I would encourage you to listen to it, send it to your leaders if they've not had the opportunity. It's really good, practical, kind of challenging advice for us and living on our faith. But today we kind of wanted to talk about the idea of creating a culture in our youth ministry. And Mark and I have talked a lot about this, and I know you've had experience as a youth pastor, as a DYD, as a leader of youth ministers. You've had experience. The idea that it's very easy for youth ministries to become internally focused. We try to create these spaces, and before we know it, if we're not intentional, it can become a place where a lot of Christians are gathering together and they love hanging out. They've got great community, but we've missed the part of discipleship that says when you're a disciple, you're making disciples. We've missed the kind of incarnational living, the mission focus, the outward energy that says we're here for a purpose, we're here for a mission. And I think in a lot of youth ministries, this is hard to create. And so we wanted to take some time today to talk to you about that. And maybe before we jump into some of the practicals, share with us a little bit about why you feel like this is so important for youth ministries to be intentional about creating. You could share maybe the dangers if we don't, but why is this such an important thing to create mission-focused youth groups?
Well, I think you have to look at the alternative. If we're not mission-focused, what are we focused on? And maybe a best case scenario answer would be, well, we're community focused. Okay, well, let's unpack that a little more. I think when it comes down to it, you're just inward focused. And there is some good that comes from an inward focus element to our organizational dynamic. I mean, obviously, my personal relationship with Jesus is going to be an inward focus. An upward focus, I think, is important, where I'm worshiping the Lord, and it's about not just the change that He's making in me, but the adoration and the love that I'm giving back to the Father that He longs for. And then I think when we talk about missional, we're talking about an outward focus, and so that really is the three-legged stool of a healthy biblical community, which is essentially what a church should be. Is just a healthy faith community based on what the New Testament says a church should be, and so then I'll just take it a step further. Do you want to talk about consequences, because that's where my mind goes next?
Yeah, that's totally fine.
I think students that are missional in high school, students that are in community, a faith community in high school, do not graduate from their faith when they graduate from high school.
Why do you think that is?
Because I think those are the elements that are required for successful Christian living, and being filled with the Holy Spirit. And I think that when we look at the statistics, and I don't have any to cite for you, but at this point it's just become part of the conventional narrative that they're alarming, that students are leaving their faith when they graduate from high school. And I think sometimes those numbers get skewed, because I think sometimes students leave their church because their church failed to integrate next gen culture in their overall sanctuary experience, I'll call it, for lack of a better term. And so students will go find community in another place. And I think a lot of good kids do that, and they find biblical community in college ministries like Chi Alpha, in churches that do have a next gen focus. But if we fail to be missional and teach our students to be missional, we've really missed, again, part of that three-legged stool of why the church exists.
Yeah, I think if I were to extrapolate some of that notion as well, and I totally agree with you, I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that a student in their high school years that are thinking about others, they don't have, they're not consumer mindseted. So like they recognize it's not all about them, it's about other people. And so I don't get as frustrated if something isn't done the way that I like it to be done all the time, or if I recognize that it was not always just about me being served. So like when I go out, it's a natural inclination, a continuum of me looking for opportunities to serve and plug in and be involved, because I'm not looking just for a place that's going to serve me. I'm looking for a place where I can be a part of a life-giving community.
And every staff pastor has heard the complaint from someone at some point in some venue, I'm just not being fed.
Yeah.
And to that, I just kind of developed this response. And I don't mean it, I don't ever want it to sound mean or like I'm trying to one up them. It's not a power move, but I learned to quote John 4:34. Jesus says, my nourishment comes from doing the will of the Father and completing the work that he prepared for me. And so believers have to understand that there comes a point when you are no longer being nourished by simply showing up and being in biblical community and hearing biblical teaching.
Yeah.
You're not, and I'll throw worship in there too. You're not being nourished by that anymore. You have to start doing the will of the Father. And we know that the Father's will is to reach the lost, to seek and save that which was lost. So therein lies sort of and that verse, obviously, I don't ever want to take a verse out of context, but I think if you dig a little deeper with that passage, you'll discover that he was trying to show his disciples just that lesson. Like, listen, guys, I'm not going to be nourished unless I'm missional.
Yeah. Well, you're nicer than me. When someone says that to me, I'm like, do you not own a Bible? Or
yeah, right.
I just need some meat. It's like, oh, is there something more meaty than the Bible? I didn't really.
Yeah.
Pretty sure you got like 8 laying around your house.
I'm with you on that one too. Not only that, but you can listen to any. I mean, we have access to the best Bible teachers in the world on our cell phone, so it's not a matter of I don't know where to be fed. It's that the reason that you're starving. It's like it's just like having a nutritional, a good balanced nutritional diet. Yeah, if all you're eating is Frosted Flakes all the time, all day, you're not getting vitamins. You're not getting protein.
Yeah,
etc.
I've found in most of those cases that statement is made when they have a specific thing in mind that the church is not doing that they want the church to do. That's their way of communicating that there's something that's missing that they want you to do for them.
And when they say that to Mark, he always says, "Have you not listened to the Better Student Ministry podcast?"
Exactly.
You're going to get fed.
I mean, you're going to choke. That meat is so big.
And I even think of the example of parents who would come to me and say, hey, we love you and we love this church, but our, 14, 15, 16-year-old just isn't, they're not getting anything out of this. And I just say, well, it's possible that I'm not saying anything they haven't already heard in my sermons.
Yeah.
But until I said, my guess is they're at a place, and these are Christian kids, these are church kids. My guess is they're at a place in their spiritual walk where they really need to be involved in bringing people to Christ. Right. And that's probably why. And if they don't, they're going to spiritually starve to death.
Yeah, I love that, Josh. I love that connection between, hey, if you're hungering for more, it's probably connected to mission and the lack of engagement in that. And let's shift a little bit to practical things that you did or that you would recommend, because a lot of times it's stuff that we go, oh man, I wish I could have done that when I was there. So what would it look like in your practical youth ministry if you met on a Wednesday night, maybe at your service? Are there some things that you did or you would wish you would have done that would help facilitate a culture of more missional living, more outward focus?
So I don't know if this is the model anymore, because COVID has changed everything.
Yeah.
And I know you've unpacked that on a lot of your podcasts, and I know that that's probably the understatement of the decade, is that COVID has changed everything. So that said, I think we can still create a space for telling our teenagers that are engaged in community, they're saved, they're following Christ, they're being discipled. I think there's a space where we tell them, now this is the point in time when I want you to bring your unsaved friends. And so back in the day, we would have called it an invite night, or, for our youth ministry, it became an annual tradition that every September was the Rage. And the rage was 4 weeks of just the biggest games we could come up with, the most creative sermon illustrations we could come up with. Every ministry team in our youth group would do their thing on stage. The dance team would prepare something special. The drama team would pull out the very best. We would spend some money to bring in an inflatable. You guys know what I'm talking about, right?
Mm-hmm. The rage.
And
the rage, baby.
We call it. It eventually shifted to October Chaos because we discovered that it was easier to be in school for a month to prepare people for these invites, because sometimes September comes a little too quick and people are busy with back to school stuff. So but anyway, my point is, though, I think you still need to carve out that space where you say to a student, we are specifically going to target a person that does not know Jesus. Maybe they've never been to church. We're going to explain everything. I find, my desire with our weekly gatherings was that we would always communicate in a way that someone with no Bible understanding, no church background could understand.
Yeah.
So the songs that we did, do they make sense to someone who is not in the community of faith? So if we're singing about the blood of Jesus, I'm not saying we shouldn't do that, but I'm going to take a few minutes before that song to explain what the blood of Jesus means. So that, you just hear a song about blood. It's like, well, is this a horror? Is it Halloween? Like, are we trying to scare people?
Yeah.
So, and I'm not trying to be funny, like truly, like what is the context for the completely unchurched individual?
Is there a way? I'm sorry. I didn't mean to cut you off, but as you were talking about creating those spaces to, for students to invite their friends who maybe don't know Jesus, I love that idea, and we've talked about that. I think that's super important. Is there a way, though, that you did that and didn't? Because sometimes I think we do that, and I did this as a youth pastor, and it became a thing where students thought, I'll bring them, and then it's my youth pastor's job to do his spiritual stuff to them. You know what I mean? But they didn't really have a perspective of like, no, you're discipling them. So I'm wondering, like, is there a way that you did that where you helped that not to be the case, or did you find that to be the case in your own situation?
Yeah, well, I think that's going to be the natural response for any youth pastor who wants students to bring their unsafe friends to church. And so this is where discipleship comes in for me. And I did it for 20 years. If there's a new way to do it, I would love to hear it. For me, it was always a discipleship class. Like I would personally, as the youth, no matter how large our youth ministry was, I still personally taught a discipleship class where we would talk about here's how you walk someone through growing in their relationship with Christ once they've accepted Christ. So we, if a kid got saved on a Wednesday, they would get we had a discipleship book, and we would say, hey, read chapter 1 this week and bring it back. And, with this, you get a free, whatever it was. And so that's how our journey began with each student. And within that little discipleship book that we used, there was a whole chapter dedicated to now you need to reproduce. So if we could get kids in the van, and that evolved into not just a discipleship class, but our Sunday morning gathering, which evolved out of Sunday school. Our Sunday school became a discipleship service where I would say this is the most important youth service of the week is our discipleship service. Don't miss it. I don't think there's a simple answer to the question you're asking. I think it has to be very, very intentional, though, in everything that you do. So I don't know. There's little nuance throughout it that we could talk about, but bottom line is, you've got to train your students on how to make disciples. Because as you said at the beginning of this podcast, I don't think you're really a disciple until you're making disciples.
Yeah. Jared, I'd be happy to hear some of your thoughts on this as well, because I know you also this was a big priority for you as well. So like if you're pacing with a student and they've got a friend that they're bringing along with them, what kind of things would you say to them to help them understand what their role is in that discipleship process?
Oh, that one's for me?
I didn't know either, Josh.
One of you.
I was totally confused.
Okay, so maybe repeat that question then for me.
Sure. So what if you're having a conversation with a student and maybe they've been bringing their friend for a couple of experiences, that sort of thing, what kind of things would you as a leader say to that student to help them understand what their role is in the discipleship process of their peer?
Yeah, well, I think it starts with them understanding we reproduce what we are. You're telling your friend they need to come to Jesus. You're telling their friend they need to be part of your church. Whatever it is you're saying, you're only going to reproduce what you are. And so the question is what are the good things that God's done in your life that you want to see happen in this friend's life? And usually the answer is, hopefully it's not nothing. Actually, if it is nothing, you say to the kid, well, I saw you lifting your hands during worship. What was that about? Well, I just, I feel something, and I feel like when I lift my hands. Oh, so you think that when you lift your hands, you're, maybe it's an outward expression of what God's doing in your heart. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. Well, maybe you could tell that to your friend. So I think it's very personalized.
Yeah.
But it's honest. It's just like, listen, dude, if God has done nothing in your life, like, let's pray that He does.
That's good.
Yeah,
that's good.
And knowing your students comes in real handy in that moment.
Yeah.
So
I think there's this realization, and especially if it's like a young Christian who's just been saved recently, and there is this immediate realization, I want my friends to be saved as well. I don't know exactly what that means, but I want them to be saved as well. And then there's this immediate intimidation of, I don't know what to tell them or how to help them figure out what has happened to me as well, which I think is why then they kind of outsource that to the leaders that had a pace
and
with
they
them
can't do that.
Exactly. And so I love the idea. I love that idea that you just shared of like, is it a continual outflow of your own life? You're just living your faith. You don't need to know the theology of it necessarily as much as the authenticity of my life has been transformed somehow by this understanding of who God is and who I am in relationship with Him, and let's figure this out together, even almost as we as we pace together side by side.
And a practical way to do that is, as leaders are thinking about their own discipleship journeys for their students, I always include a full, whether it's a class or an online training or however you're doing your discipleship, but teach students how to tell their testimony.
Yeah.
This was my life before Jesus. This is the moment when it was transformed, or moments. Because for like a church kid like me, I don't know that there was one moment, but I can point to some specific moments when I knew God was real. And then this is my life and how it's different. And back to the thing that Jesus said about nourishment coming from doing the will of the Father. Like you were saying, Mark, once I know that a new believer is watching me, that makes me take my own journey a little more seriously.
Yeah.
Yeah, to answer your question too, Mark, my perspective, what I would encourage a youth leader or youth pastor to do is I think there's a balance, number one, to understand. Sometimes we think kids can't engage with the mission of God or discipleship until they've reached this certain level of maturity. And I just think that's unhealthy. We have to understand that kids who are being discipled also should be discipling others. We don't have to wait for them to be a fully complete person.
Yeah.
However, we also have to recognize, because this is the other side of the scale, is we kind of abandon them to do it on their own. And so I think what we need to do is invite them to immediately, when you put your faith in Christ, immediately mission should be a part of that. Okay, now what does it mean to live this outward? But we're also going to invite you to do that with a mature adult who can model it for you. So you're being poured into as you're also pouring out. And I think the problem is we make discipleship strategies, or we don't make it a strategy at all.
Yeah.
But sometimes our strategies are either we never trust the kids to live on mission, and therefore they get, like what Josh said, is they just never engage that part. Or we go, go live on mission, go save your whole school.
Yeah.
Good luck. Let me know how it goes.
Yeah.
And it's like, that's not going to work.
Yeah, I can literally remember sitting at some staff meetings and like us talking through the different students in our group and thinking, or maybe even at times saying out loud, I'm not sure that this kid is ready yet to like really share their faith. Like what a short-sighted, what a discounted view I had on their ability to talk about what Christ is doing in their life. And I think a lot of that had to do with me being lazy and not really having a process to help them articulate that or figure out how to live their life as a Christian. So I'm like, they're either ready to do it or they're not ready to do it. And almost to some degree, they got to get ready on their own even, which is even more foolish when I think back at it.
And can I give a word of caution, and I'll try to share it in a way.
No,
that's
we'd rather not. But
complaining.
thank you. Moving on.
Because I don't want to frame this as a pet peeve, because it probably is, but I think it's a word of caution. The I don't know, the small group revolution that has taken place the last 20 years or so. Now churches are great at having small groups, but I always ask youth pastors, volunteer youth workers, youth directors, whatever the title, I always ask them, what are you doing? What is your discipleship model? What are you doing? And sometimes the answer comes back, well, we do small groups, and discipleship takes place in small groups. And that's a real danger, particularly for groups that grow larger than say 20 or 30, is that you've got a dynamic where maybe they're talking about the sermon, but is that discipleship?
Yeah.
Like, I mean, is that just community? Because that's a great example of community, but I don't know if it's discipleship, because it takes more than. So I mentioned a book, and I think maybe I'll just throw in a resource here. That book, Alive in Christ, I used for a long time. We just re-edited it and made that available. What I really want to do is get it available digitally. And then we actually wrote a book when I was a youth pastor. One of our youth leaders was very gifted. He wrote the whole book. We had it edited by the guys that do all the work for Rick Warren. And so we did all this work specifically so that we were checking that discipleship box with the greatest amount of weight and integrity that we could give to it. So I think, leaders, you've got to find a discipleship resource that explains the power of the Holy Spirit, that walks students through things like how to share their faith, how to understand their own personal testimony, how to understand what salvation is. And I think that if leaders don't do that, they're really missing it with this generation.
Yeah, I think that's great, Josh. I appreciate that. We don't have too much time left, but I do want to ask you one question as we kind of close out here, and it's this idea of creating missional culture. When it comes to inviting students or youth ministries to participate in things that happen outside of the church or the service, I know you've done a whole variety of things, whether it's community engagement, mission trips, anything like that. Like, what would you encourage a youth pastor as they're thinking through this to say, hey, you should really make this a part of what you do in youth ministry, and particularly stuff that doesn't happen at a youth service or a small group, but it happens outside of that, engages students with the world around them?
Yeah, so I'll share what we did, but let me share first how we arrived there. It was the junior high pastor and myself just looking at our town. I was in a town of about 12,000 in Michigan. It was called Fenton. Fenton, it's just outside of Flint, Michigan. It's a blue-collar, hard working class community. And we just looked at our town and said, not what do I think they need, but what does this community think they need? And as we started answering that question, it created all kinds of community involvement. So I said that's how we started. Where we arrived was, and I think we stole the name from Hillsong United. They did something called social justice, and so we did social justice every Saturday in the summertime, and we would just go help people with their yard work. One time there was a tornado that came through our community, and we went out in our social justice t-shirts and helped clean up people's yards I'm not talking about like disaster zones. I'm talking about just limbs and cleaning up leaves and things like that. And then in the wintertime, we would go shovel we would find out, because as you do this, you start to discover where the needs are, because you'll be cleaning up somebody's yard and they'll say, who really needs help? The little widow lady down the street, she really needs your help. Oh, okay, well, we'll go take care of her too. And so then you go back and you rake her leaves in the fall and you shovel her snow in the winter. And then, and so out of that creates a culture where you've got volunteer leaders coming up with their own ideas of how to do community outreach. You've got students going, hey, I have this idea. There's this little kid who's got brain cancer, and I thought we could come up with a fund to give him special Christmas presents this year. That's an actual example from my youth group. That's cool. When I was a teenager. His name was Aaron Coleman. I still remember it to this day. And her name was Michelle Crawford. She was a 15-year-old girl who just saw a need and was like, I'm going to go after it. And I think a lot of times we think we have to take responsibility for doing everything, and that can be overwhelming. I don't think that's the right model. I think we make it part of our culture and who we are, and then you'll notice, other people in the group will start getting their own ideas. And then there's the other obvious stuff. I think every student needs to go on a foreign missions trip before they graduate high school. I think every student needs to give at least $1,000 to missions inside of one calendar year before they graduate high school. So those are just some little metrics that I adopted as a youth pastor, where it's like, man, I want every kid to give $1,000 to Speed the Light inside of one calendar year before they graduate. Because again, when they're a 35-year-old and they're looking at a stack of bills and their marriage is in trouble, are they going to go to a place of faith, or are they going to go to a place of panic and trying to solve their own problems with things like, the way people solve their problems in unhealthy ways, substance, divorce, etc.
Yeah, for sure. I think that's all great, and I love those little practical thoughts there. And I think the way to kind of sum all this up is, and this is kind of what our intention was at the beginning of this podcast, is this idea of if we're not intentional about it, it probably isn't going to just naturally happen, unfortunately. Because I think the subconscious just moving forward is we're just going to fortify ourselves. We're going to have a great little group. We're going to love coming together. We're going to love sharing life with one another, and then we'll leave, and then we'll get back together next week, and without it being like some intentional planning. And it's not impossible things by any means, but without thinking strategically through these elements and these opportunities, it doesn't just happen. It doesn't just happen accidentally. It has to happen intentionally, and I really appreciate that. Hey, as we wrap things up here as well, we want to give you an opportunity now. If you'd listened to last week's podcast, you've heard the worst thing in youth ministry that Josh did. I don't know.
And it was bad, right? If you missed it,
amazing.
Go back.
Absolutely amazing. Don't just skip to the end to listen to it, but if that's all you do, that's okay too. We're curious if you have another, it's just this little segment of best or worst idea you've had in youth ministry. I'm gonna be gracious and give you an opportunity if you have a best idea to present it, but we all love hearing the worst ideas as well. So, but you choose best or worst idea in youth ministry that you'd be willing to share with us at the end of this episode.
Gosh. Okay. Well, do you want me to do it right now?
Yes, sir.
All right. So
I don't want you to think about it, because we find that whatever came to your mind first is the worst thing because you're still regretting it.
I'm there. It's funny. I'll give the people what they want, and two, it's actually a lot easier to come up with the things that you did that were bad.
Yeah.
Okay. So we're on a missions trip. We go to Belgium. We're working with refugees. Belgium had a real open door policy on refugees. There were a ton of Muslim, Iranian, Iraqis coming into Belgium. So we're ministering to them on our day off. We have a day off, and the missionary's like, what do you guys want to do? And he says, we're only 2.5 hours from Paris. We're like, oh, we want to go see Paris. So we get up early, we go into Paris, and he's like, the best way to see now I'm making him the bad guy. Well, I'll just tell you what happened. I thought it was a great idea. So we'll just call it my idea. We're like, the best way to see Paris is with these open top tourist buses that are driving, double-decker deals where you can sit up on top. You guys have them there in New York City. Yep. And so we do that, and we're like, hey, we don't, now I guess I'm remembering some more details. The missionary did say, you're going to need the Metro pass as well. We're like, okay. Well, then once I see how much the bus tour is, I'm like, you know what? We could probably save money by not getting the Metro pass, and we'll just use the bus tour as our transportation.
Yeah.
Which was a great idea until we went our separate ways. So like, everybody needs to be with an adult leader, but other than that, go have fun, go sightseeing. We will meet back at this. It was the starting point for the tour, because there's 3 or 4 different, bus lines going all over the city, and you can see all the sights and get off and get on when if you want to stay at the Louvre for 3 hours, you can. If you just want to stop for 5 minutes, you can. So the group disbands, and you guys are youth workers. You know how there's always that one leader that you're like, if anything can go wrong, it'll be this guy.
Oh yeah.
He's got a heart of gold, but I'm just not sure.
He's got a heart of gold, but he also has a brain of gold, if you know.
Well, in case he's listening, I know he's actually a genius. He's actually too smart for his own good sometimes. So anyway, 5 o'clock rolls around, and I go to get on the bus to go back to, because our meeting time is at like 7 p.m. So I'm like, all right, so it's 5 o'clock. I'm done. The students I'm with, we're done looking at the Eiffel Tower. Let's go get on the bus and see what's next. And we wait, and we wait, and we wait. finally someone looks at the brochure that promotes the bus tour, and it's like, it stops at 5 o'clock. So we're like, oh, huh. Well, I'm a grown-up. I know how to work the Paris subway system. So we figured out, and we go back. I had, after our meeting, whatever the meeting time was, let's say 7 p.m., from 7 p.m. to probably 10 p.m., I was thoroughly convinced that this youth leader was never going to show up. There was, because now, and this was a time before we had mobile. We did have, people had them here, but nobody had an international cell phone back then. I think I had a flip phone at the time here back in the States. So no way to communicate with them, no way to figure this out. Well, about 2 hours late, emerges our guy with the missing students. But as you guys can all imagine, I spent probably 3 hours sitting there going, okay, whose parents do I call first? It's 1 a.m.
Yeah.
It's it's noon in back in the States right now. So what am I? Oh boy.
Yeah. What happens in Paris stays in Paris. The parents do not need to know. Oh,
that's a great way to wrap that one up.
That's good.
Dude, that's a great story. Josh, thanks so much for being with us. If you missed the first one, go back and listen to that as well. It was awesome, and this was great as well. So we appreciate you. If people want to find you, what's your social media, Josh?
I'm Josh Wellborn on Instagram, Facebook, YouTube. I have a TikTok, but have you guys done that yet? Are we doing that? Is that something? Is that something the grown-ups are engaging in?
Yeah, I'm not 13.
Not me. No, I know there are people that do leverage it well, but no, not my deal.
Yeah.
But my thing is, I always want to grab that social media handle before it gets snatched up by another Josh Wellborn.
There you go.
So I think I've got all of them in my name.
Nice.
The Snapchat. I don't really engage in all of them. I do engage on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram though.
There you go. And they can listen to the last podcast to find out more about social media influence and presence. And
that's right.
Hey, before we sign off, just want to say one more time, happy anniversary, Josh.
Happy anniversary, Josh.
It's the 1 year anniversary.
There it is.
Seems like it was just yesterday. We've grown so much. We've bonded. We've gelled.
It's true.
That's right.
It's true.
Thanks, man. Appreciate you. Guys, we'll see you on the next Better Student Ministry podcast.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for listening to the Better Student Ministry podcast. If you enjoyed today's content, be sure to check out our 10-minute training videos and discussion guide for you and your team. You can find those on YouTube and Facebook by searching Better Student Ministry. Be sure to give us a 5-star rating, subscribe, and let us know in the comments what topics you would like covered. You can also email us at betterstudentministry@gmail.com.